What's up, guys? The Snowman here. Super exciting time of the year as we have a brand new tennis season upon us. The Australian Open just a few days away. I'm going to break down the men's singles draw right now. Please check out my women's draw preview as well. And give me a thumbs up if you're enjoying the tennis coverage. You know, I do draw previews annually for all 4 Grand Slams. But for right now, let's dive into this men's draw and analyze it section by section.
And most of the field is healthy, but unfortunately the world number 1, Carlos Alcaraz, is the lone glaring omission from this draw. Alcaraz pulling out last week with a right leg injury. The 19-year-old is the youngest player in ATP history to be ranked at number 1, so hopefully we see him back on the court very soon. With the absence of Alcaraz, that leaves another Spaniard as the number 1 seed in Melbourne, Rafa Nadal in the top left as we take a look at the first quarter of this men's draw. Nadal, the reigning champion at the Australian Open, thanks to that thrilling 2-set comeback in the final last year versus Daniil Medvedev. You might remember Rafa got off to that blistering start in 2022. He was 20-0, didn't lose a single match until mid-March in the Indian Wells final, his best start to a season ever. Now Nadal at age 36 looking to defend his title and equal Serena Williams' Open-era record of 23 major singles titles. He's already got more than any other man. The bad news for Rafa is the shaky start to 2023. He lost both of his United Cup matches in 3 sets to Norrie and de Minaur. Some pundits pointing out that his movement has been a step slow to start the year, not the same physicality in long rallies. We'll see if that continues, but the worst news for Rafa and his fans is this draw, in particular the first round opponent of Jack Draper. Draper, a 6'4" lefty with tons of weapons, currently in the semis of Adelaide, just took out Karen Khachanov. Draper, an ascending young star with a live arm, so Rafa in for a fight in round 1. He could see number 31 Nishioka in the 3rd round, maybe a rematch of the latest US Open 4th round clash in round 4, Nadal versus Tiafoe. Francis continues to climb up the ranks after his maiden Slam semifinal appearance last summer in New York. Number 10 Hubie Hurkacz and 20 Denis Shapovalov, both kind of players who can beat anyone but also lose to anyone, so that could be an eclectic mini section. And then Medi at the bottom. I'm hoping the 7th seed Daniil Medvedev is feeling recharged after a 2022 campaign that just felt a little bit flat ever since he let the Aussie Open title slip from his grasp. He was still consistent enough, but the results at the majors were unimpressive. Round of 16 defeats at the French and US Open, wasn't allowed to play at Wimbledon. It's easy to forget that Medvedev was the world number 1 for long portions of the spring and summer last year. I'd still put him, Alcaraz, and Djokovic on relatively even footing as the 3 best hardcourt players in the world. Medvedev probably the safest bet in Section 1 to make the semifinals, although the lurking 29 seed Sebastian Korda does scare me. He's already top center in RBA this season. I hope we get a Rafa Med rematch in the quarters. Nadal up 5-1 in that rivalry, including the 2 major finals. I wouldn't be shocked if the Russian turns the tides. On to section number 2, where Stefanos Tsitsipas is the 3 seed. His season down under off to a flying start, 4-0 in singles action at the United Cup with Team Greece. He looked very sharp against the likes of Dimitrov, Goffin, Coric, and Berrettini. Maybe lost in the shuffle was how good Steph's season was in 2022. He didn't win any massive titles aside from Monte Carlo, but 63 wins, 2nd on the ATP Tour. I've just got this feeling that Tsitsipas is going to win a major very, very soon. He's been knocking on the door for a few years now, really ever since he knocked off Federer at the Aussie Open in 2019. Tsitsipas, one of 4 men who can end the Aussie Open ranked number 1. Casper Ruud can be number 1 by reaching the final. Tsitsipas and Djokovic have to win the whole thing to be number 1, otherwise it'll remain Alcaraz, but this is a pretty innocuous draw for Steph. I don't really see anyone who can challenge the 3 seed until the 4th round, where he's likely to see a young Italian, either in the form of Musetti or Sinner. I just want number 15 Jannik Sinner to be 100% healthy this year. He showed us glimpses against Djokovic at Wimbledon and Alcaraz at the US Open, that 5-setter that ended at 2:50 a.m. Sinner, such a complete player, but needs to learn how to finish matches. He and Tsitsipas actually met at the quarters of the Australian Open last year. It was a very hyped out encounter until the Greek ran away with it in straight sets. Not a lot of dangerous lurkers in this quarter, though. Number 11, Cam Norrie, looks solid for Team Great Britain at the United Cup. I like the all-Canadian encounter on tap at the bottom. Felix Auger-Aliassime versus his elder statesman, Vasek Pospisil. They'll be very familiar with each other's games. Number 6, FAA, led the tour in wins last season, played 92 matches, had that memorable 16-match winning streak in the fall that spanned across 4 different tournaments, so we'll see if he's still hot. He might have to play 2014 Australian Open champ Stan Wawrinka in the second round. I think a lot of us are hoping for one last push out of Stan this season. Ultimately, it's a section that lines up favorably for the top 2 seeds. Section 3 is a lot of fun storylines. We'll start at the bottom, and what a difference 12 months makes for number 4 Novak Djokovic. Last year at this time, he was at the center of not just tennis news, but world news as his embattled visa struggle with the Australian government ended with the Serbian bitterly missing out on the first major of the year. Now the world is in a better position to deal with COVID, making things safer for the unvaccinated 21-time major singles champ to compete in Melbourne. Djokovic, a big beneficiary of Alcaraz not being present. That gives him a top 4 seed in his own section at the tournament that he's won 9 times before. Djokovic aiming to equal Nadal's tally of 22 career major titles, and he's off to a sizzling start this season. Career title number 92 for Joker last week in Adelaide. That ties him with Nadal for 4th most in men's history. Impressive straight sets wins over Shapovalov and Medvedev in the process. The 35-year-old showing no signs of slowing down. Roberto Carvalho Baena is who Djokovic draws in round 1. He could see Dimitrov, de Minaur, or his old foe Pablo Carreño Busta before the quarters, but the other half really intrigues me because number 5 Andrei Rublev versus Dominic Thiem could be the best first rounder of the tournament. Thiem given one of the 8 wildcards at this event. I can't wait to watch the former U.S. Open champ back in action this year. Hopefully he's at full health now. Thiem is a guy who, if he's right, can surge back in the top 15 in no time at all. The other 2 big names, I'm hoping Djokovic has to play either Kyrgios or Rune in the quarterfinals. Number 19, Nick Kyrgios, always produces great theater down under. Kyrgios won 93% of his service games in 2022. That was the best on tour. He was far more consistent than he had been the last few years, won 37 matches total, the second most for him in a single season. And what about number 9, Holger Rune? No player finished 2022 hotter than the young Dane. At the Paris Masters, he became the first player to beat 5 top 10 players in the same tournament, not including the ATP year-end finals. Rune took out Hurkacz, Rublev, Alcaraz, Auger-Aliassime, and then Djokovic in the final. He's the first Danish player in the top 10 of the ATP rankings, and the last time we had 2 teenagers in the ATP top 10 was May 2007. A young Djokovic and Andy Murray were both 19. Same thing right now with Rune and Alcaraz. He made the final in his last 4 events of 22, so I'm excited to see how his game matures this year. Sign me up for Rune versus Kyrgios in the 3rd round all day. I'll get up at 3 a.m. for that, and then we'll see if anyone can challenge Mr. Djokovic. Finally, we get to the 4th section. The top-ranked player here at the very bottom is world number 3, Casper Ruud. I mentioned it was Tsitsipas, but Ruud, one of 4 men who can end this Australian Open in possession of the top ranking in the ATP. Of course, Ruud came tantalizingly close last season to being ranked 1, just had to beat Alcaraz in the US Open final, but fell a little bit short. Ruud also made the French Open final in 2022. He's breaking all sorts of records for Norwegian tennis, the highest ranked Norwegian ever. It's going to be tough for Ruud to follow up his great success of last year now that he's got a target on his back. And Ruud has some semi-dangerous potential matchups in the first few rounds. Davidovich Fokina, Bublik, maybe Jensen Brooksby in the second round. Kokkinakis and Fonini sure to produce fireworks in the first round. Also, my eyes go straight to number 13, Matteo Berrettini, against the 5-time Aussie Open finalist Andy Murray in round 1. The Italian was victorious in 4 sets when they most recently met at the 2022 U.S. Open, so That'll be a classic battle of offense versus defense. There's a lot of question marks surrounding the 12 seed Alexander Zverev. We haven't seen him much since the gruesome ankle injury at last year's French Open. He's a player who I think is a surefire Grand Slam champion one day, but a troubling 0-2 start to 2023 for Zverev. Losses to Fritz and Yuri Lehechka at the United Cup. May take some extended time before we see the German back at full strength. And speaking of number 8, Taylor Fritz, he's coming off a title with Team USA at the United Cup. Of course, had the breakthrough at Indian Wells last year. It's a nice enough draw for Fritz, although Basilashvili in the first round, no laughing matter. That match will produce a surplus of flat-driven missiles from both players' baselines. I do tend to think this section is the most wide open, mainly because I'm not sure that I trust Ruud yet on a quick hard court like we typically see in Melbourne. He's a player who usually requires time for his shots to be set up, so it could be Fritz's time to shine, but overall, I feel like Djokovic and Medvedev are the safest bets to reach the final. Of course, Novak will be the favorite, but I fancy Medvedev to go all the way and claim the first major of the year and his second ever Grand Slam title.
Thanks a lot for watching my men's Australian Open preview. Please leave a comment. Let me know who you think wins it all. If you think anyone can stop Novak Djokovic this time around, please check out my women's Aussie Open preview as well. Subscribe to the Snowman Sports Media for more tennis content. Cheers.